Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're digging into a set of sources you sent over things like Wikipedia, a specific timeline, and even bits from that film, Chapter 27.
Right, and it all centers on, well, the very tragic murder of John Lennon by Mark David Chapman.
Exactly, and our goal here, using only these sources, is to sort of pull out the main ideas.
To help you understand what the specific material tells us about Chapman, his thinking, the day itself, and what happened afterwards.
It's really about going through this information together. So let's start with Chapman's background, based on what's in these documents.
Okay, well, the sources describe a difficult childhood. Mentions of living in fear of his father, abuse towards his mother.
Yeah, that stands out. And also these early, kind of strange fantasies.
Having godlike power over imaginary little people. It's quite a detail. And it seems to fit this pattern mentioned early on.
Oh, you mean the extremes, the duality.
Exactly, like skipping classes, drug use on one hand.
But then, a complete flip, becoming a born-again Christian, a really popular YMCA counselor they called Nemo.
Right, even doing humanitarian work with World Vision met President Ford, apparently.
But the sources also show things getting tougher for him later, psychologically.
Yeah, dropping out of college, huge guilt, suicidal thoughts, that attempt in Hawaii.
Which leads to that really chilling quote the sources include from September 1980, writing to a friend.
I'm going nuts. And then signing it, The Catcher in the Rye.
Which points right at his main obsessions, doesn't it? The ones these sources highlight.
Absolutely. Art Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, and of course, John Lennon.
So the sources say he was initially a fan of Lennon. What made him turn, according to this material?
Well, two key things pop up. First, that more popular than Jesus comment Lennon made years earlier clashing with Chapman's religious beliefs.
And second?
A really strong sense of perceived hypocrisy.
Ah, right. The sources quote him feeling like Lennon, with all his wealth, laughed at people like me who would believe the lies in songs like Imagine.
Exactly. And resentment over the lyrics in the song, God, like, who does he think he is? It seems like this mix of religious offense and feeling personally mocked.
And Catcher in the Rye is just woven through all of it.
Oh, completely. The sources really stress this. He didn't just like the book, he wanted to be Holden Caulfield. He called it everything.
And those first public statements he made?
Were aimed at getting people to read the book, according to the timeline. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, let's shift to the days leading up to December 8th. The timeline suggests his planning was complicated.
Yeah, muddled feels right. An internal conflict, maybe, between spiritual ideas and this pull towards notoriety.
And the sources list other people he apparently thought about targeting.
Right. McCartney, Johnny Carson, Elizabeth Taylor, even Reagan. Seems Lennon was chosen partly because it was easier, maybe envy, but mostly
Fame?
seems to be the driver highlighted in these sources, yes. And there was that earlier failed attempt in October 80.
He came to New York, then left.
Yeah, returned home for ammunition. But then the sources say he saw the movie Ordinary People and it temporarily stopped him. Hesitation, planning, it's all mixed.
He even showed his wife, Gloria, the gun.
He did, and later, the sources note, he resented her for not doing something, not intervening.
Other signs mentioned.
Seeing "Thou shalt not kill" on TV, missing a therapy appointment, it paints a picture of things escalating internally.
Okay, so December 8th itself, what do the sources tell us?
The timeline's very specific. He left things in his hotel room, almost like clues, bought a new copy of Catcher.
And wrote in it,
This is my statement. Signed at Holden Caulfield, spent the day hanging around the Dakota building.
interacting with people.
Yeah, fans, the doorman Jose Perdomo, and he even met Lennon's son, Sean, briefly.
That detail is chilling.
Isn't it? Shaking his hand, quoting "beautiful boy." Then around 5 p.m., Lennon and Ono leave. He gets Lennon's autograph on the Double Fantasy album.
That moment was caught on camera, right?
By Paul Gorish, yeah. Chapman apparently said later he tried to get Gorish and another fan to stay, almost like,
A last chance. If they'd stayed, maybe.
who knows. But they left. Then, 10:50 p.m., Lennon and Ono return.
Man, that's when it happened.
Chapman steps out from the shadows, fires 5 shots with a .38 revolver. 4 hit Lennon in the back.
Do the sources agree on whether he called out Mr. Lennon?
There's a slight discrepancy there. Some say yes, some don't mention it. But afterwards, stayed right there, took out his copy of Catcher in the Rye and started reading it until the police arrived. No resistance at all.
In that statement to police hours later.
The big part of me is Holden Caulfield. The small part of me must be the devil. It really brings it back to that obsession.
Okay, let's talk about the aftermath. Legal side, prison, parole.
He was charged with second-degree murder, confessed to using hollow point bullets. Why? To ensure Lennon's death, according to the sources.
And his wife, Gloria.
Knew about the gun, apparently, but wasn't charged. Again, that resentment from him is noted.
The court case really focused on his mental state, didn't it?
Big time. The sources detailed the disagreement. Defense team argued he was psychotic, maybe schizophrenia, manic depression, a break from reality.
But the prosecution.
Their experts, and ultimately the court, found him delusional, yes, but competent to stand trial, meaning he understood what he was doing was wrong.
Sources suggest he cooperated more with the prosecution's experts?
Maybe trying to avoid being seen as crazy? Then, despite his lawyer wanting an insanity defense, he suddenly pleaded guilty.
Why?
Claimed God told him to. The judge went along with it.
And at sentencing, he reads from Catcher again.
That passage about catching children falling off a cliff, he got 20 years to life plus psychiatric treatment.
Been in prison ever since '81.
Yeah.
Solitary confinement often.
For his own safety, yeah. Sources mention Attica, Wenday, Greenhaven. Odd detail. Barred from anti-violence classes, also for safety reasons.
What about media contact?
Initially refused, saying he didn't kill for fame, but later gave interviews, Gaines, Larry King, Barbara Walters. The sources note this contradiction. Yeah, and the parole board picked up on that, this seeming interest in notoriety.
Which brings us to parole. Eligible since 2000. Denied how many times now?
13 times, according to these sources. Next hearing is set for August 2025.
And the reasons for denial seem consistent.
Very. It always comes back to the seriousness of the crime, how it undermines respect for the law, Yoko Ono's continued suffering, and safety fears.
And that motive.
Exactly. The fame-seeking motive. The board called it a selfish disregard for human life of global consequence. They acknowledge he's low risk physically now, but that motive, it looms large.
His own statements at hearings have shifted too, right?
Yeah, from saying Lennon would approve, to finding peace in Jesus, to calling the crime premeditated, selfish, evil. In 2022, he explicitly said he wanted fame too much.
And Yoko Ono's opposition is mentioned consistently.
Unwavering. Citing safety for herself and Sean, and for Chapman too. Petitions support her stance. The impact is obviously still huge.
Okay, finally, the cultural impact, specifically that film, Chapter 27.
Right. The sources describe it as trying to explore his psyche in the days leading up. The title itself references Catcher, framing the murder as Chapman's own twisted final chapter.
But it was controversial from the start.
Hugely. Accusations flew, glorifying a murderer, giving him the attention he wanted. Online petitions, Yoko Ono expressing hurt, Sean Lennon calling it tacky.
Jared Leto's transformation for the role gets mentioned.
Gaining 67 pounds, getting gout.
Yeah. And the casting of Mark Lindsay Chapman as Lennon Yoko had apparently objected to him before just because of the name similarity.
They filmed near the Dakota.
Not the actual death scene, sources say, out of respect. The filmmakers insisted it was about understanding psychology, not glorifying the act.
How was it received? Polarizing is the word used. Critics were generally harsh on the film overall, but Leto's performance, widely praised in the sources, brilliantly measured, utterly convincing.
And this controversy connects back to denying him fame.
Yeah, the sources mention McCartney and Ono asking fans not to use Chapman's name. It raises that whole ethical question. Can you depict such a crime without inadvertently giving the perpetrator the notoriety they craved? Understanding versus platforming.
The sources also put this in a broader context, don't they?
Yes, mentioning a larger disturbing pattern of attacks or stalking targeting celebrities, George Harrison, others. And the Reagan shooting by Hinckley, another case tied to celebrity obsession.
So pulling it all together from these specific sources, the difficult background, the duality, those core obsessions, Catcher, Lennon, perceived hypocrisy, fame, the detailed events of the day, the legal arguments over sanity, and then decades of imprisonment where the fame motive keeps coming up in parole denials.
Right. And the cultural reflection, like Chapter 27, grappling with how to even tell such a story, it shows how that fixation on Catcher and his feelings about Lennon combined into something the parole board termed an act of global consequence.
Looking back at everything in these sources, the early warning signs maybe, the obsessions, the legal debates, the ongoing impact, it definitely leaves you thinking.
About that line, where fandom or admiration twists into something dangerous. About mental health struggles and violence, and maybe about the ethics of telling stories that might feed the very notoriety that fueled the crime in the first place.
So after going through this material with us, what's the one thing that really sticks with you? What are you left thinking about?